G'day, HMR here. I was late for the live stream. Sorry for anybody who was waiting, but I don't think too many people were waiting. I had to wait for a video to finish rendering. That's what I had to do. Where's the other thingamabobber here? There we go. Hopefully the sounds are going through okay. So yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about people with codependency. When you're with somebody with BPD, or after you've been with somebody with BPD, or might be a relative, etc., or if you haven't got to no contact yet, what is a struggle? What is the struggle all about? What are people going through? Oh yes, I have to be able to sit here and play with buttons. That's always fun. So it's really important, I think, for people to realize that they need to reduce their reactivity and increase proactivity. Most people know what reactivity is all too well, right? What am I trying to do here? Because now I can't find it. Okay, there I am. Go. For the moment, anyway. So, yeah, when people have been with people with BPD, who themselves are often, unless until really a lot of therapy and or to recovery, they're very impulsive, so they're very reactionary. Right? Some people say they have such thin skin that it's like they're like just a raw nerve, so to speak. So anyway, people with codependency aren't the same as that. Excuse me. People can be sensitive, have sensitive temperaments, and not have BPD. But so what's really important for people with codependency to think about, or if you don't have codependency or you don't identify with codependency, then why do people get so reactive? Well, not so much why, but people get so reactive. People with BPD, right? Probably lots of people know why that's happened to them if that's happened to you. And the other thing is how to reduce that. And how to go from, I think I just said this, sorry. How to go from being reactive, which becomes rather impulsive, after, being really in a stressful, difficult, or impossible relationship, that gets really difficult not to be reactive. That's how people lose themselves too, in that reactivity. So, which doesn't mean you're getting BPD or you're catching it or anything like that, and you're not being infected by it, things of that nature. So, you want to reduce the reactivity, even if you're still in the situation, or if you're the ex of, etc. It's easier if you are no contact. It's more difficult if you're still with a person with BPD, untreated especially. And then get proactive. And what's the difference? Well, it's really important to think about like reactivity, right? It's like stimulus response. So what happens is a person with BPD, you're not expecting it, or maybe, you're just dating someone, and maybe, maybe some people are new to this sometimes, right? We have to think about that too. So the reality is that reactions happen pretty much instantaneously. So reactions are pretty much impulsive, whether they're from a codependent or a person with BPD, or even a narcissist. But they're not to say that they're the same. But it would be impulse control. It's at the heart of being overreactionary. Though when people are really stressed, when people are really hurt by people in these relationships, then people get more and more reactive. So lots of people will get with somebody with BPD and they've never been reactive before, or not overly reactive emotionally, but then end up getting more and more increasingly so. Or maybe we're a little bit prior, because the other thing about codependency is really, it's rooted in childhood, and it extends forward in people's lives, and that's part of the healing recovery journey. People need to go, well, it's helpful too, and I do that work with clients, to go back and look at the family of origin, and look at where the roots of codependency are in each person's life. It's really important to look into that. So with that said then, so people are just reacting because there's so much stress. There's so much chaos, drama. You don't know what's going on. And then the other part of that is when people with BPD are, getting triggered and they're doing splitting cycles, they're splitting, devaluing you, and then this, that, they're acting out, they're acting in, and you don't, people don't know how to keep, well, even if you understand what's going on, it's hard to keep up to it. People try to make sense out of it, and this leads to a lot of reactivity, because, you know, even if you're trying to just have a conversation with somebody with BPD, or you're thinking about leaving someone with BPD, and people are often asking me, well, should I tell them, or should I just go, you know? And because let me point out, not all people with BPD are going to be ghosting people and just leaving people. Many, many more do these days. But again, there are some people that have to make the decision to end relationships because not all people with BPD are the same. So that's pretty important too, I think, for people to think about, because it depends. You know your own situation better than I could possibly know it. So I think reactivity is pretty clear to people, right? And so what do you do about that? And that's, you know, I mean, how to go from being, I've had people ask me, I've had clients ask me, and I've had people, I don't know, but in general, and perhaps an email ask me, because they realize they're reactive, right, to the borderline, or to the narcissist, or to, you know, and maybe people don't always just have one person with BPD in their life. You know, it's not always just that partner or that ex. It can often be a family member and an ex, or a family member and a partner, or a parent and a partner, etc., or even a friend too. Like it's not always just one person. So the more that you're trying to make sense out of what they're doing, or what's going on now, or what just happened, the more, well, people get emotionally reactive, and people put a tendency to have to look at their boundaries, because a lot of people don't have the strongest boundaries, right? And then you encounter somebody with BPD and all the impulsivity and all the chaos and dramas I've just alluded to, and it's like, so if you don't have appropriate boundaries, people emotionally react. It leads a lot to those dating conversations, right? That justify, argue, defend, and explain. Which won't be the person with BPD doing that for you when you say, hey, why did this happen? Or why did you kick me? Or why did you just yell at me? Like, what's going on here? Or they act really rude in a restaurant, and it's embarrassing among all other things, you know? And you're like trying to get them to cut it out, and they won't. And then when you try to talk to them about it, they throw in that red herring. Because see, people with BPD really don't gaslight, like narcissists do. But maybe the difference in experience isn't so much to parse as in, you know, what's really behind these things. But so they'll throw in a red herring. You might say after, if you're at the restaurant, you know, why did you boot me under the table? Why did you get so upset? You know, you made a scene there. That was really uncomfortable. What happened? And they'll be like, I don't know what you're talking about, and all that kind of thing. I've explained in a video of mine called, you know, about no closure in BP. And the fact that each and every one of these episodes will be one of no closure that you experience over the course of a relationship or dating or however long you're with the person with BPD. So you're trying to ask them or talk to them, maybe at a calmer time, about what happened. And then they'll just say, I don't know what you're talking about. And that's not about memory, because BPD is not neurological. It is not nestled into the brain in some biological way. So often when people with BPD say, they say, I don't know what you're talking about, they say they forgot. It's usually not true they forgot. Dissociation can impair the clarity of, you know, a triggered, dysregulated, emotional kind of like episode. But more often than not, they're just avoiding accountability and responsibility when they go, I don't know what you're talking about, I don't remember, I didn't know. It's just all the defense and denial, more so than anything else. And so the next thing you know, you're trying to ask them about something, they throw a red herring, you end up justifying, arguing, defending, and explaining what they're then accusing you of. You know, like, you didn't do this last week, or you did that, or, you know, who cares, I don't know what you're talking about what I did, but you did this, or you could also have somebody in your life that you're sitting at the restaurant, you know, and they do something, and they embarrassed you, and they've gotten angry in public, whatever, and booted you under the table, and they'll say, I didn't do that, you did that. You know, it's all the defense. So the thing about that is people react because they want to make sense out of it. But the reaction is also deeper than that. And people need to think about this, and this is something I help clients with healing and recovery journeys is learning what really is pushing that reactivity. So it's many different things at many different times, depending on the person with BPD, how they behave, etc., how you're feeling, what's going on. But I forgot what I said earlier. So an interesting question that I get asked often, in working with clients is, so we're talking about how to reduce reactivity and how to be more proactive and what that looks like in each different stage and step through recovery for people with codependency and after these relationships. And clients will ask me, well, how do I control my reactivity? And I think that question is fascinating because it's both a question and a clue into a big piece, a big moving piece of what's still an issue, problem, challenge, or block to being, to being able to reduce reactivity, which is thinking you can control it. Because that's not really the answer. The answer is about being much more proactive and not reactive. And so between a reaction, any reaction, but it's hard to know this, because if you're very stressed, you've been embarrassed and maybe compounded other things, and a lot comes at you at once, well, what happens to us is then, in the amygdala of all of us, nobody's special in this category, people with BPD may struggle more with these reactions based on adverse childhood experience, which BPD is a response to. Codependency is also, but to a lesser degree, one could say. It's different, right, with some overlap. But the thing is, now I lost my train of thought because I put in a caveat thing in a circle there. Yes, whenever somebody is really stressed, shocked, confused, hurt, or all of those things at once and then some, what happens is our brain gets flooded with an emotion, whether we're aware of the emotion or not, or could, right? And then it impedes logical thinking anyway. And a lot of people just end up, and I don't mean pure obligation guilt right now when I use the word fog, a lot of people just end up really in a fog because confusion is like, I don't know what's happening. You can't keep up. And you're having either a fight, flight, or freeze, fawn response to all of this stress and chaos and drama. And people wonder why they're so reactionary and why they can't be more logical. Well, that's the reason why, because in our imperfect human condition for all of us, whether people have BPD or are codependent or whatever, when we get shocked, surprised, overwhelmed, stressed, you might be tired, all this conflict, chaos is going on, then, the amygdala's job is to protect you. And so it goes into like thinking there's a lion about to eat you in the living room, and you'll get fight, flight, or freeze or fawn. And it really impedes one's ability to think clearly. So one of the things to help in reducing reactivity is to deep breathe, is to try to slow down, is to try to put a pause between the stimulus, the stress, the person with BPD, the issues, the chaos, the drama, etc., the accusations, and any reaction. You need to have some space in between the stimulus or, what hurts or what's confusing or what's chaotic, what you want to say something back about, or you might overreact to. You need to learn how to put a pause in there between what happened and reaction. And the same is true for people with BPD in a different way as well. And I'm just wondering if I'll hit the right thing here. Yeah, you never know. I just might. There you go. So anyway, I just have some information in terms of, so reactivity. Oh, hey there, Wills. How you doing? Glad somebody's here because people are just popping in and popping out. But I shall just continue. Glad to know you're here. Where was I going to go from here? I was just going to talk about, so I've kind of explained a bit about reactivity. And of course, people will be reactive, and people understand they're being reactive. And then people tend to justify that reaction. And that all of that keeps people stuck in reactionary overreactivity and overreactionary responses to people with BPD. And in a different way, to a different depth, a similar thing keeps people with BPD being, very reactive as well, emotionally. So how do you change this? Well, number one, like I said, the space between the other person's action, craziness, yelling, whatever it is, and how you want to respond, if you want to respond, but not react. So creating space there, a pause. That's hard to just do out of the blue when you've been overreactionary or really reactionary. So the first thing you need to do is start with mindfulness. And yes, this is for people, well, it works for people with BPD, but it would work for codependents as well. Because between the stimulus and the response, you need to create that space. And that space that you can create, and I help clients to work on this, when they work with me, because it's something people usually can use some help with and need to really practice. So in that space that you create, that's where your power or autonomy is to choose your response versus a reaction. And in that response lies your ability to have growth and freedom and to not be reactive, okay, to be proactive. And another really important thing, and you can't always do it if you're right in the same place with somebody with BPD, but later, and or if you feel like you need to get into a healing process, and if I resonate with you, I'm out here, but maybe with someone else, who knows. But the thing is, people need help often to really do the work of clearly identifying not just what you felt in that moment or what you felt when you reacted. So you first want to practice mindfulness, and deep breathing really helps, and slowing yourself down and just putting that pause in between whatever just happened and a reaction, so that you have the chance to form a response or to find a detached neutrality. And so then the second thing that's really key in a strategy, is identify what you're feeling. And that's hard to do if you're right in the situation. That might be best done later, in therapy, in a process with someone, journaling it as well. You need to put words to what you're feeling. And if you practice this and you use mindfulness, the hope is then that maybe in the middle of a situation where you might otherwise just react, you can do that mindfulness, you can be mindful, you can deep breathe, you can slow yourself down, you can know that you want to be proactive, not reactive, and you want to maybe respond but not react. So by putting words to what you're feeling, and not necessarily in the situation, right, but at other times, then you bring a part of your brain online, so to speak, right, because you slow down the amygdala's response, and this is for codependent because we all have an amygdala, and it responds the same way to any perceived or actual like stressors, etc. So you want to calm down and deep breathe and start identifying what your feelings are, so that you can detach from them enough to allow the fight, flight, or the freeze or fawn response to settle, so that you can then be in a place to respond or take space until you can, or whatever's possible, and or be in a detached, neutral place, which many people who are dating, well, maybe dating, they don't know, but have been in a relationship with somebody with BPD and they're still trying to make it work, etc. Many people will learn this and find a way, although sometimes it can still get reactive. So increasing your emotional intelligence is really important, and that's a process. This is all about processes. People can't just do this by snapping their fingers, especially when you got somebody who's doing stuff that causes you a lot of reaction, a lot of pain, a lot of stress. And the third thing in this strategy is, and this is not to be done just like, don't try it just next time you see the person with BPD, or if you get hoovered or whatever. Got to practice all of this, and this is what I work with clients to help them with, and really put into, a perspective and a lens of being proactive and why that's a challenge, looking at all the reasons why that's a challenge. So the third thing is focus on what matters most. So what matters most in any situation where somebody with BPD has been triggered, dysregulated, brought chaos, shocked you with something, hurt you, etc., it's really important to focus on what matters most. And what matters most isn't controlling the person with BPD. It isn't getting them to stop what they're doing, not even if you're out in public. That's not your responsibility. People with codependency often take on those feelings of like, oh my God, I'm so embarrassed. I can't believe this is happening. What are people going to think of me? But this is another thing about why it's important to get into recovery and a healing process for your codependency. But focus on what matters most. And what matters most, even if you're sitting in the restaurant with that person with BPD and they're making a big scene, what matters most is what you focus on. So be mindful and be practicing this. Deep breathe. Don't worry about what other people think. Check in with your feelings. And all this takes processing, and it's a process. People can't just naturally do it in the middle of the stress of somebody with BPD reacting all over the place or giving you the silent treatment, or whatever the case may be. Because usually when people react emotionally, you're being hijacked, as I just alluded to, right, by a very primitive lower part of the brain, the amygdala, that is instinctively wants to keep you safe from threat or harm. And so that part of the brain is not the rational part of the brain at all. And it overrides the rational always when it's when you're stressed, and emotions are literally flood the primitive part of the brain. And so it's not the rational part, like I said, and it's really sensitive and about past experiences that have nothing to do with what's happening now. So things always get magnified, as they do for people with BPD, exponentially times many more times. Same happens for somebody who's trying to not react back to somebody with BPD and all the chaos, the drama, and the stress. So you got to be in the present moment, and what matters most is behaving in a way that is aligned with who you are. And so many people in these relationships will have lost a big part of who you are, or what your boundaries were if you had healthier boundaries. Although people with codependency get in these relationships, I say with great empathy and respect, need to have more effective, healthier boundaries. But so you need to really think about acting in accordance with who you are, and instead of getting them back, controlling them, or one-upping them, or just becoming a control struggle of who's going to win, which is pretty human, and it happens. Person with BPD is going through what they're going through, the trigger, whatever, they're behaving however they are, and I'm not making excuses for that, but it's not your responsibility. And even if you're embarrassed by it, you got to sort of focus on yourself in the here and now and the present moment, because that's what matters the most. And upholding your own values. And that might be, well, it's hard in reactivity, but, to uphold one's own values. And when you get caught in one of these emotional storms, right, it's really hard for anybody to be their best self. And the other thing that people can try, this you could try immediately without practicing it a lot, but count to 10. But in the time you're counting to 10, be mindful and be aware of your breath, and try to deep breathe and try to slow down that primal fight, flight, freeze, fawn response in your amygdala when the person with BPD has gone off because their amygdala has shot them even further from whatever's happening in the here and now. And then you want to be able to respond but not react. So you want to be proactive in a response if and when the time is right for that, or you want to put in a response versus react. And so it's really important to think of those things. And again, those 5 things, amid many other things I work with clients on, is starting with the mindfulness, putting the space between the stimulus, the stressor, the chaos, the drama, etc., and a response, because you want it to be proactive. You want it to be a response and not a reaction. Second thing is identify what you're feeling, which usually can't be done in the situation itself. Focus on what really matters most, and it's not how they're behaving, or if you're embarrassed, or what people are going to think about you, or controlling them. It's about you. It's about you calming down your own amygdala's fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response. It's not about trying to make sense out of what they're doing. It's not about trying to get them to stop what they're doing. And the 4th thing is count to 10 and deep breathe, I would add, to the counting. And then, if you can, at a certain point in time, respond, but don't react. And sometimes you might find, a lot of people might find, if you practice these things and you really look to be more proactive as opposed to, or, put that pause there so you're not reactive. And then you work on this in a healing recovery process to be able to be responding, not reacting. You want to be in a detached place of neutrality emotionally. And that also requires people working on their emotional intelligence level, because that's part of codependency recovery as well. And so being proactive is, moving forward, dealing with what is, being mindful, being present to the moment, and that sort of thing. And so I think it's really important for people to think about this, because what happens in the reactivity of people with codependency, so it's really important to note that reactivity comes after what happens with the person with BPD often, right? But that's where you have your personal responsibility in the whole thing, which is really important to remember. And so having said that, people with BPD, whether it's in the idealization phase and mirroring phase in the beginning of getting to know them, they're not inducing you into anything, which means persuading or making you do something or somehow getting you to, react a certain way. This isn't the way it goes. This is where people have to look at their own personal responsibility. And it's not always easy by any stretch of the imagination. So, and just remember, too, that a lot of people with codependency are not going to have, I'm probably going to hit the wrong button. No, I did. Yes, I hit the wrong button. Okay. People with codependency, because of the roots of codependency, and how people really need to get into a healing and recovery journey for that. People need to do that to be able to look at all these moving pieces and parts of why the reactivity, what's happening, how'd you get in the relationship in the first place, what's blocking you if you have codependence. But my point I'm trying to get to here, because I pushed the wrong button, so here's the right button. Emotional intelligence, it's so important to cultivate and be building emotional intelligence. And with what I'm talking about here today, whoops, just to be clear, it's hard to talk, and whoops, I hit the wrong button again. So I have to practice coordinating button selection with moving my mouth. So where was I now? I forgot my thought. That's annoying when I do that. But it's really important to know that, this over-focus on them is not going to help anybody. And so reducing reactivity and increasing proactivity is a really big process in codependency recovery in and of itself. So some people can do that in moments of time. Some people can do that in waves. But when you're with somebody in one of these relationships, any kind of relationship type that's untreated with BPD, it's different, for 25% of mothers, with an adult child BPD. But every other relationship type, you need to get out of there. You need to have space. You need to go no contact. Because you can't heal when you're in the middle of the battle. You can't enact these strategies when you don't really know where they're coming from. Yes, the person with BPD is pushing you all over the place and stressing you out. There's all this emotion created, yes. But people have to, with codependency, take responsibility for their own reactions. And it doesn't mean that what the person with BPD isn't doing isn't crazy making and beyond. So that's the personal responsibility for people with codependency. So it's complicated stuff. And the other thing I just want to say is, like everything I'm talking about here, when I'm talking about specifically net, like just did, I have a new blog that you can find. It's still a bit of a mess, but at ajmaricoaching.com or ajmariblog.com. I think .com or .ca, I don't remember. But there isn't much up there yet. There's going to be much more coming. What I'm going to be doing between blogs, video series that are coming, and a course, and maybe a couple of ebooks, I don't know. What I'm going to be adding to what I do here, on YouTube and how I work with clients, of course, I work with clients, it's like you can get the best of everything in sessions with me in terms of your recovery and understanding all of this and moving forward. Is that I'm going to be blogging a lot more at ajmari.com, which is also probably will be linked here for like trying to fit it on thumbnails as ajmariblog.com. So there's going to be a lot more of that coming. And, you know, like I said, some of it won't be free, but the blog, there'll be a lot of blog posts over there. Hi there, Elle. You said, not sure if you know, oh, there's an echo. Oh, good. Have I been echoing all this time? Because I shouldn't be echoing. Let me just check something. Reverb. Oh, there's an audio problem. Oh, that's not going to be good, is it? There shouldn't be, because I did check that before. Hang on. Let me just eliminate this. Although that could create another problem. Is that any better? Oh, it's too bad I said all that. And it was not good audio. Is that any better now? Just waiting to hear if anybody can tell me if the audio is better now. That's unfortunate. No, I didn't know that it was echoing. So, it might still be for a different reason. Yeah, it's true, Wheels. It's really hard to do in the moment, you know, to prevent. Oh, it's better now. Okay. I thought I'd solved it a different way. Well, I hope it wasn't too terrible before. Or I guess I should have been audio backing this up so that I could have just, yeah, sorry about that, guys. I hope you could discern what I was saying. I don't know how bad it was. But Elle said yes, echo again. Or maybe that was from before. Oh, okay, good. Yeah, so did you hear what I said, though? Because that was like 25 minutes of stuff. I mean, I don't know how bad that was. So maybe somebody could let me know, were you able to understand me? It appears that the videos you record are a bit on the quiet side. Is there any way for you to turn up the volume? Well, I don't think most of my videos are on the quiet side at my end, but I don't know. I try to have, it depends what I use to record them, right? Oh, good, you can understand things. Thanks for letting me know that, Seti. Thank you so much. I just wonder if anybody has any, you know, do you have any questions? Do you have anything to share about this? Because, you know, this is really something that I think, Will said, yeah, I could still understand. Oh, good, thank you. Because I think it's so important, you know, that this reactivity that you're having, if you have somebody with BPD in your life, or a narcissist for that matter, you know, when you have codependency, the roots of that are in childhood. So the reactivity is happening again in the here and now in those situations, right? But the reactivity is not brand new in your life. And people may not have reacted the same way as a child or growing up, but then people get way more reactive with people with BPD or narcissists regardless, unfortunately, because that's, you know, what they do creates a lot of stress, etc., for others. Because I think it's really important that people remember that people with BPD are no more responsible for how you feel than you're responsible for how they feel. It's a really key thing that a lot of people don't want to hear sometimes. It wasn't too bad, just slightly distracting. Well, I'm sorry about that because, you know, since I'm on camera and I have the camera on, the camera has a microphone in it. And then the computer can go to default mic, and that's what I was worried about. So I actually had another I'll get off this. It's boring. I had input the audio source as the camera, which I guess now as I think about it, put it in there twice, right? Like, duh. Sorry about that. So I continue to work on things, and somebody suggested that sometimes my videos the volume isn't high enough. I think there's been a couple like that for sure. I'm not sure about most of them, whether that would be a podcast video or a video. So I think I caught myself doing a video recently on one of my iPhones when the volume wasn't turned all the way up. But anyway, so I think what's really important here that I want to add to the conversation about, as I've said here, but about borderline personalities or relationships and or narcissists, it holds true for too. People, I mean, that codependence with either. And depending on your family of origin, and if you know the origins of your codependency or not, or what's happening for you or not, is personal responsibility is so important. And people with codependency can struggle with it too, because it's in the vernacular, right? It's like, in the labyrinth of linguistic whatever, it just in the vernacular of everybody, the way that we talk, the way that we express ourselves, the way that most people will just say it. I could catch myself saying it too, but I don't believe it, and I kind of know a little bit better, but still I can catch myself doing it. That we think somebody made us feel something. And I'm not saying that when somebody with BPD is, they're hurting you and they're triggered, all this dysregulated stuff is going on, and they're blaming you and they're aiming it at you and all this. Well, it's not like they're not a great big reason why you're having a lot of feelings, for sure. But they're not making you feel what you actually feel. Because if you think about it, a lot of people with codependency don't want to hear this, but excuse me. But if you think about it, if you were to say that they make you feel thing A because they did A, B, C, D, then how is it that we can say, and we can say this with assuredness, that people, who are in relationships to or were or have access to BPD, whatever, that you don't make them, you don't trigger them, you don't make them go off, you don't make them have these huge reactions to what they're having these huge reactions to. So I think that's a really key thing for people to realize. And it's like, it's hard, it's difficult, because I think we've all grown up with this idea that when person A does thing B, we feel thing C, and and we wouldn't have felt it without them, so they made us feel it. But yet there's a little bit more personal responsibility to own there, in the sense that, and it's not just psychobabble either, in the sense that, yes, if there wasn't a certain stimulus, right, or stimuli, then you might not have a certain feeling, but because whatever you are feeling can be somewhat attributed to that stimulus, what you're feeling is still your responsibility, right? So this is something that I think a lot of us come out of childhood thinking that, like when you're a kid, your parent does something, it hurts you, you feel this way, it's like their fault, right? And this is where people with BPD are really stuck too, because with not always the age 2, right, but childlike sort of, to varying ages actually, they can be triggered. But this childlike reality that because they get triggered, it's your fault, which it's not, right? So many people have fear, obligation, and guilt, and none of that is the fear, understandably, can happen. Obligation is something rooted deeply within codependency, so that likely goes back to childhood too, fear as well. And then the guilt, because I don't know about you guys, but I know when I was growing up, I got blamed a lot for things I never did. And I probably could have handled really well being held accountable for what I did, but I was never held accountable for what I actually did. I was always blamed for things I didn't do, and the rest was kind of like, it was just the parents I had. Nobody was paying attention. So anyway, I think it's so important it's important to parse the information that people need, and whatever you might feel you need right now, because I don't know where everybody's at. But really important to parse the reality that people with BPD are not making you anything. Now, in idealization, in the beginning, in the mirroring, that feels fabulous, right? That's way too good to be true, and people have instincts about that. But are they making you feel that fabulous, or are you just feeling that fabulous? Like, they have a part in it, but again, so it's separating out this idea that everything that one feels is caused by the other. Because, like I said, if you turn that around, I think you can see it more clearly. But you don't cause what the person with BPD feels, though they will tell you that all day long. But that's because they don't have any reference point. I'm not excusing it. But they don't have any reference point to be able to attribute it to anywhere near where it's coming from inside of them. So, and these, weak and poor ego boundaries, people with BPD, people with codependency, not exactly the same. Lack of boundaries, this is how come, codependency rooted in childhood, what's so important about that is that most people have already had these responses in childhood maybe not the same responses you're having now, or when you were with a person with BPD or a narcissist, but you've had these responses from a certain age in childhood, which is different for everybody, where you really were helpless, where you really couldn't do anything about it. And so that's why, at the heart, this is one overlapping reality, at the heart of codependency, like in a different way at the heart of BPD, or even at the heart of NPD for the narcissist, is when people get into this helpless feeling, or learn helplessness, or feel out of control inside. Now, various reactions, right? I'm not saying codependents are the same as borderlines or are the same as narcissists, but it's if people feel that sense of being out of control, that there's going to be so much reaction, and it gets impulsive for people even without BPD or NPD, which are responses to adverse child experience. I'm going to be writing and talking a lot more about that. Probably more writing than talking, because you say something 80 times, you think it's enough, right? And I just say it to be helpful, right? I'm not saying, but like, yeah. Could you say that NPD, BPD, oh, sorry, blah, my mouth gets ahead of whatever. My head was ahead of my mouth. Could you say that NPD, BPD behavior is in fact triggering you, even though we are still responsible for our feelings? That's a really good question. I think yes, but I think what we need to be careful of with that is what we've come to understand, quote, triggered to mean, right? Because we don't just have triggering in people with BPD get triggered. I suppose narcissists get triggered as well. Human beings can get triggered. Codependents can get triggered. And we live in a, quote, trigger culture. Where it's like, if you're not politically correct, oh my, So everything is like social justice warriors put trigger warnings on everything. So yeah, that's a really good way to sort of parse that, that so other people's behavior and or reactions and or when they're triggered, whatever they're responding to, because it's often with people with BPD or even narcissists, it's not in the here and now. People with codependency, it's to the best of your knowledge, right? It's in the here and now, but again, there's always the subconscious at work that we have stuff in our subconscious. That's just true of every human being. Whether it's unresolved or not is a different thing, though. So yeah, I guess it would be fair to say it's triggering you, even though you're still responsible for your feelings, because if borderline A does A, B, C, D to you, then yes, your feelings are going to be probably pretty intense pretty quickly, and it might have something to do with what they're doing for sure, but then where does it come from inside of you as well? And this is something that in my healing recovery journey, like not only from BPD, but also codependency and probably some CPTSD, but I have to get this into a, before I talk about it much online, I have to put it in a sort of ordered fashion. And what am I really talking about? But the point is, yeah, that's a really good way to put it, but we are then responsible for our feelings. I was trying to think of an example of something. I can't think of anything recently. Let me think. No, I can't right now. So I'll see if I come up with something, or somebody else might give an example. Oh, I'm glad you understood everything, Seti, with the echo. I'm sorry for the sound problem. Nobody wants to do that. This thing, technology. I just use it. I'm not an expert in it. Wheels, I think I read that, sorry. Yes, I'm sort of going backwards up there. Hey there, Roller Girl. Oh, please don't laugh, but, okay. Please don't laugh, but I realized I always miss him during the full moon. Well, I'm not going to laugh. That's interesting. What are your thoughts on that? Last time it was 2 days ago. Did anyone else struggle this past weekend? And wow, I haven't heard that put that way before, so give me a second to think about that. Well, here's what I would say for people's consideration, so I don't expect a response back on this, Al, but for women in particular who still have their cycle, right? Monthly cycle, I'm not talking about BPD cycles. I believe when I was going through that, it's so lovely to live beyond without that. But when I was going through that, I think there was something to a full moon in the sense of that it really intersected with that time of the month. And so I think there's some effect it can have on us for sure, because we are 70% water. I mean, I can't remember the whole explanation, but we're 70% water. But having said that, so people can equate these things, and maybe they're related somehow. And I would just say that's one way for women, but who are still of that age, and still having that monthly visitor. But I think for some people, I'm not going to say there's nothing to that, obviously. But I don't know if people maybe make more of it than. But there's something to it. I think there can be something to it. Personally, I don't think I've ever felt. I mean, well, yes, except for what I just mentioned when I was younger. I don't think I really be. I might be affected in some way by moon phases and such, but I don't pay attention to it, so I don't know. So I guess one other thing I could say about that is probably what we focus on can have more effect on us, or is it affecting us anyways? I don't really know. Um, and uh, and then again, too, it's hard to say whether when you were struggling it was because it was a full moon, or would you have been struggling anyway? Like I don't know. So, but that's very interesting, and I know a lot of people have a lot of. Sorry, my eyes itchy. I'm not like I'm tired. A lot of people have a lot of different opinions about that, but to the extent that there is energy, we're 70% water, and there is energy in the universe, etc. I think I would keep that in a rather moderate way for my own way of thinking, but people do believe that to varying different degrees, and so I'm not going to say there's no effect at all. I think it's also important to think about what else was happening, but if there wasn't anything else happening, then yeah, that might be a really big effect. Said he, my diagnosed BPD-X lied about her entire life. Oh, sorry to hear that. Everything was a lie. She told me she was a nurse and even got into scrubs to go to work. Wow. Everything was a lie. Would this be sociopathic as well? Well, first of all, I don't think sociopathy exists because it's psychopathy, but that's just me in words, right? If she lied about her entire life, I can't really tell you for sure, but I would say that's even a little extreme for BPD, right? Because often they will lie, they'll lie about things to protect themselves, get out of personal responsibility, even silly things that they're lying about, right? But when somebody lies about their whole life, that's kind of different. So I don't know if that would be somewhat, I just don't use the word sociopathic, psychopathic or not, but narcissist, it's hard to say. But yeah, it's unlikely to be the defensive reason, that most people with BPD will lie to defend themselves. If they construct a whole lie that is their life, well, it could be narcissistic personality disorder, or I guess it could be more, but there might be other things that account for it too. I mean, I'm obviously not going to be able to give you the answer, right? Because I don't know all the circumstances of the person. But it definitely sounds like it's not just within the parameters of BPD, that somebody would concoct their whole life as a lie. And no, because most people with BPD are going to like show the way it really is, going to say something, and even when they tell you too much information, that people don't realize, but when you're getting to know someone, or you're dating a person with BPD, they tell you too much information up front, usually they're not concocting a whole lie about their entire life. So, yeah, it sounds like it's outside the realm of BPD is one way to put it. And, oh, it was an eclipse too, and I missed that too. How about that? Um, yes, I remember that you said you studied astrology. And I mean, I think there's something to it, but I don't like more. Some people ascribe to it way more than I would, but I'm not saying there's nothing to it, right? And then again, it's up to whatever each person believes for themselves. So I just wonder if people. I think that was so. I wish I could think of an example for that idea that you can be triggered by the behavior of somebody with BPD or NPD, but you're responsible for how you feel. And what that really offers people is a window into, but if it's subconscious, that's what therapy's for. That's what getting help is really helpful for in many ways, to bring more of what's subconscious still, or not understood or remembered or clear about your childhood and how you might have developed codependency, or why, because the roots are there. So, because anybody can get triggered, and it doesn't always mean the same thing. But I'm still trying to think of an example with that. Well, here's an example I shouldn't use. I get these comments, right, trolls, and you know, there it is, and I'm looking to see if there's comments, and I look, and there it is, and so I have to read it. I have to read it to know whether it's just you know, a comment, somebody sharing their experience, ask whatever like comments are in the channel, or is it something else? And so I would say I don't get triggered by it because I don't care anymore. But right there is a good example of something that it could be triggering. Somebody could get triggered by one of those people with their crazy comments that are just designed to try to hurt you. Or, so what I'm aware of in that moment, I read it, and I'm like, oh, that's a good one. Oh, yeah, whatever. And then, you know, I'm able to just, I don't react to it or respond to it and just like trash, whatever. But like, that would be one example of where, say, another YouTuber, just, you know, I'm not thinking of anybody, could get a comment like that and could really react and then kind of attribute how they're feeling to that person's comment. So that's one not great example of what I was, you know, what you had said up there that really made a lot of sense. Oh, the end of me. How are you doing? Well, thank you for that. I'm just, you know, yeah, trying to be helpful and everything. So I'm just wondering what else I can say because people are quiet, and that must mean you're in listening mode. I don't know. I'm so used to interacting, you know, with clients and people and stuff. So it's so weird. Some YouTubers thrive on coming here to just talk, 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 talk. I'm not one of those, but I keep working on it. So I think, yeah, it'd be really important to see when a person with BP or NPD does something, you know, whatever it is, and then you're feeling something. That could be part of that mindfulness and deep breathing, slowing yourself down, pause to check in with your feelings. What are you feeling? And and maybe not in the moment, but certainly I help clients with this to go further down the chain of it all to say, and why is this feeling or that feeling so strong? Because usually there's a link to one's past. Not to say that when somebody is stressing you out and behaving really poorly, etc., that that's not a reason that people are gonna feel a lot of different things, right? But then there's the other reality of, just to reiterate on this, the other reality that once you know they have BPD or you suspect it highly, you've seen the patterns, you've educated yourself about it, and you stay, and you decide to stay, or perhaps there's an unconscious push in people with codependency to keep trying and keep hoping, then it's your responsibility that you're even there, that they can still do what they're doing in your space, in front of you, around you, etc. So, and that doesn't absolve them of the responsibility for what they're doing at all. But just in terms of reactivity versus proactivity, which has a lot to do, by the way, with, like I said in the 5 things, but what people are focusing on really matters. And so the more you're focusing on BPD or learning about BPD or watching 1,000 videos on BPD, which people have to watch, you know, a certain amount, yes, and maybe more, but it's important to balance that with focusing on yourself and not always them, and especially after you're out of the relationship or you've gone no contact no matter what the relationship type. You asked me, in your opinion, what is the best way to detach from the hurtful situation and to regain emotional balance? Is there a particular exercise for that? Well, kind of, if you listened earlier, I guess that was the like not good audio part. Depending how bad it was, I might just have to like do that over. I don't know. But yeah, it was those 5 things I mentioned earlier. And so, and they're not 5 things that people can do right now in a situation, right? They're well, except for count to 10, you could try that. But those 5 things in a part of strategy, right? There's more than 5, but the 5 I mentioned are things to practice and start to be journaling about and delve into. And if you're in a healing recovery journey or get into one with somebody, then this is what's going to help it, because you need to know more about yourself, the roots of the codependency. You need to also, to reduce reactivity, you need to understand your own emotional landscape better and build like resiliency skills, and also increase emotional intelligence. It's a very key part of this recovery. So there isn't anything quick and fast other than just deep breathing and trying to be really mindful to the present moment. And another thing that people can do if you're still with somebody with BPD or a narcissist or around them, or maybe it's your mother or maybe it's, a relative or something, then you need to take leave, take actual literal space, not just try to put space between the stimulus and the response or the reaction, but you might want to just go for a walk or go out the backyard or, I can't tell you how many washrooms I used to hide in my life before I developed these skills myself to be able to not react and to find that neutrality. And, like somebody could scream at me right now and I'd be like, I'd go right into observer mode. I would be observing the screaming and going, Because, sometimes it happens in client sessions, mostly with people with BPD. They can really get triggered and upset and they can really start yelling. It doesn't matter if we're on the phone or FaceTime or Zoom or whatever, so, I'm seeing them on the camera, they're seeing me on the camera. And that's, that's my, job, my profession, my role. But it's the same thing in my life. It's sort of, and I didn't know that when I was a kid or growing up. No, I was just like a raw nerve reactionary person to narcissistic parents that were crazy. But the thing is, so it's really about when you practice these things and getting into active healing and recovery, then it's bringing together a lot of things, and it's also working on yourself and the things that will push feelings even more so. So the person with BPD or the narcissist is bringing, is doing what they're doing, and you have feelings about that, and then it often goes back to feelings from childhood that are unresolved, and it's a double whammy. So, but taking actual physical space when they're, if they're having a temper tantrum, or they're raging or yelling or screaming, or usually when they do the silent treatment, the quiet borderline usually withdraws, but you need to withdraw at that point in time. And like I would tell anybody, like if you're at, I don't know in this day and age if you can be, but if you're at a restaurant, for example, with somebody and they start behaving like that, if that happened to me, I'd leave. I'd just be like, well, or I'd go out, walk, or go to the bathroom, take a break from it, because it's not yours to deal with. That can really help how you're feeling. But people need to identify what they are feeling, because often the reaction is, person A just did this, and right? And it's like you don't even know what you're feeling, because you're taking on somebody else's feelings at that point. Oh, I'm glad you're listening, Roger. I know, I have to come here prepared to talk my head off. That's what it's all about, right? Apparently. You said he has found a therapist. We are not together, but your words help. Thanks so much. No one else out there like, well, thank you. No one else out there like me. Well, of course, we're all individuals, but yes, and even when they get to therapy, then it's years. It's years of, really, really difficult work. And then anybody who thinks that, if you have codependency, and after these relationships, you need your own recovery and healing journey too. And so, but when they're in therapy, so you said you're not together, but I wonder if you're absolutely no contact, and if you're able to have your focus be, more often than not on anything and everything, yourself hopefully too, and not if that person is an ex or not. Because this idea, that you can get them to go to therapy and it's going to help the relationship. No, it can't possibly even work fast enough, even if somebody's really committed. They really want to engage treatment, but they have to want it for themselves, as I've been saying out here for 30 years. Yes, they have to want it for themselves. And when they say they want it to save a relationship, oh, and another thing, don't get dragged into couples counseling. Big mistake, never works. It's a debacle, because they need their own healing and recovery, and people from codependency will benefit from their own healing and recovery. And then by the time, whatever the person with BPD is doing in their therapy, by the time, after you've been with somebody with BPD or a narcissist, and if you have codependency, by the time you get into your healing and recovery journey, and what that really means in the depth of that, and how I work with clients, and how I'm sure other people work with clients, but it's not like a one-step process, or a two-step process, or a three-step process, and then you're done. And the other thing I just like to challenge the notion that you can get to a place of recovery with codependency that you have to like watch out for all the time. And if you're not careful or taking care of everything or got it all juggled just in balance somehow, because who in humanity gets anything perfect, that then, oh, you're going to get in trouble again. No. If you really go through the kind of process that I do with clients, healing and recovery from the relationship and codependency, it's not a lifelong journey. It's not. Codependency can be a little bit more of a thing because the whole world is kind of codependent in a way, 95% population or more. But we can, as I have done in my life, we can just bring that down to like, hardly matters anymore. So that's a really cool thing. And is it possible to be proactive versus reactive if you have no idea how the BPD will act in the first place? Oh, that's a fascinating question. You said it's like you being proactive does not seem to do anything to influence their behavior. Oh, I love that. I love the way you think. That's great, because that's where a lot of people get in this twisted knot of perception and misperception and confusion that leads to you're not being able to extricate yourself. So, is it possible to be proactive versus reactive if you have no idea how the person with BPD is about to act? Or, well, okay, you know what that is? That's, and I mean this with all due respect, right? Because what you just said there is fabulous, okay? It's really, I'm glad you shared that so I can respond, right? So what you're saying right there is you're in a so people with codependency are often in a reactivity kind of space without being aware of it, because if you're worried about, thinking about, concerned about, you're walking on those eggshells, right? What is he or she with BPD or the narcissist? What are they going to do next? How are they going to handle? Is it going to be a good day? Is this going to be a good 5 minutes, a good hour? Or are they going to lose it? Because often, even when you get to know their patterns and stuff, you can't really understand why they're losing it when they're losing it. What's the triggers and stuff? And nor do you need to, right? Because that's their responsibility, not yours. So when you're in that walking on eggshell place that you just described there with the first part of your question, well, you can't be proactive if you're still in a reactive mindset. Does that make sense? Codependents are often in a reactive mindset of the walking on eggshells. What's this person going to do? Are we going to get through this day? Can we make it through this dinner? What mood are they going to be? If you're thinking about all of that stuff and walking on eggshells, which, like, in these relationships, people are thinking about a lot of that stuff. But that's an aspect of codependency that means you're on your back foot already. And you might have good reason to expect that you never know how they're going to act. It's very true. So that is a reactive mindset from which one can only be reactive. So if you want to be proactive, what you need to do is get out of the reactive mindset. In other words, you're going to do whatever you're going to do with them, for whatever you're still doing it with them, no offense. But you can't give a crap. You just can't care about, are they going to make it through the dinner? Are they going to embarrass me in front of my family? Are they going to do this? Are they going to do that? Are we going to have a good afternoon, or is it going to go to crap? Is it going to go all bad in a second or two? So if you're still holding on to all of those things, which is walking on eggshells, but also what codependents do in terms of worrying, and that's really externalizing out your need for predictability, your need for control. They're often out of control. So you need to change the reactive mindset before you can be proactive. So what would being proactive look like when you don't know what the borderline or the narcissist is about to do or how they're going to behave? You have to not be focused on it, worried about it, holding feelings and thoughts about it. You have to just be there in the moment, from being yourself, knowing that you're engaging this person that you don't know when they're going to go off or not, and invariably they're going to at some point. So a proactive mindset would have to be developed in order to be proactive in the situation. And then one could even argue, codependency aside, is it emotionally safe for you to be in a proactive place when you're walking on eggshells and you're in a reactivity mindset because your amygdala is like, but like, what if this happens? What if that happens? Because this is what they do so often. So it's hard to be Yeah, I think I answered that part. So if you're in a reactive mindset, you're not going to be able to be proactive. And the only way to be proactive is to disengage entirely from how they behave, will behave, might behave, what they might do, what they might say. Have a strategy and a plan for how you're going to take care of yourself and not engage that. That would be giving yourself the best chance to be proactive. And then the second thing you said, it's like you being proactive does not seem to do anything to influence their behavior. Aha. But why would you want to be proactive? This is what every codependent has to realize if you don't yet. You want to be proactive for you, not them. You can't control their behavior. You can't fix them. You can't rescue them. So the idea that, you're associating proactive with, again, focusing your attention and everything on them. Proactive is about a mindset of me, yourself, in the space with that person. What are you feeling? What are you aware of? How mindful and present to the moment are you? You know they could go off. You know who they are. You've been through it before. So being proactive has nothing to do with thinking about, worrying about, holding, anxiety or concern or fear or anything about what they're going to do or what they might or might not do. That's all still framed in a reactive mindset. And it's likely being driven by your amygdala. So this is why these relationships are not healthy. Hey there, Ted. Seti, my therapist says it's psychopathic. Well, yes, it probably is. When I confronted her on the lies, she came clean. Oh, the lies were dramatic. I stayed with her anyways because I saw how she really was. Is that codependent? It would be codependent in the sense that you're staying with her anyways. Was you not doing the healthiest thing for you? It was you not having a healthier boundary to go, whoa, wait a minute. She concocted a whole lie of her life because that's a betrayal. So yeah, it's not the healthiest thing to do because I don't know if that worked out, if you're still there. But, your therapist saying it's psychopathic and then she comes clean about it. Well, I wondered what happened after that because, you see, a psychopath wouldn't come clean about it. So, there's variances and differences in individuals, but psychopaths don't usually admit what they've done. So then that brings it back into a more confusing space, I think. Could you talk a bit more about why couples counseling is bad? Oh, it's horrible. Also, why is it the case that the therapist usually openly sides with BPD in the sessions? Well, it happens. Okay, couples counseling, first of all, most people I do some couples work, but it's under certain conditions and things like, it's not like an untreated borderline with a codependent. Oh yeah, let's do that. No. So the thing is, first of all, a lot of people that do couples counseling, they're qualified to do marriage and family counseling, right? Couples work. They don't know anything about cluster B at all. They might not even know that much about codependency. So they're kind of running a script from what they've been taught to the level they've been taught because they don't understand a lot of this cluster B stuff and or codependency, like I said. They've been taught, so if two people in an average marriage with, quote, average problems, communication issues or a little bit of this problem or that problem, then couples counseling can be very effective, but not when cluster B is on the table. And I would say when someone is codependent, it's also not really effective. And why these counselors often side with the person with BPD is because they start walking on that person's eggshells, whether they even understand BPD, recognize it. You might tell them, the person might say, hey, I have BPD. They might not know what it means. I'm not saying all counselors that do couples counseling wouldn't know what it means, but it's, and the reason why it doesn't work is because people with BPD need their own therapy, and actually people with codependency need their own recovery. But people with BPD need to do a lot of healing for a lot of years. And then even by then, there isn't a lot of couples. Like, I have the odd time where I'm involved with a family, or I'm involved with somebody who's had significant treatment from BPD and a partner. And even in those circumstances, I can't, well, it's not that I work mostly with individuals, but in certain circumstances that I've been involved with client work with couples under that situation where the person with BPD has really had substantial treatment, but substantial treatment is really hard to quantify, right? So even in these cases, I see these relationships and or marriages more often than not still end. And it's really difficult because people with BPD are, they might have had substantial therapy, and it might be 2, 3, 5 years, but they're still not to the depth of where they need to heal to understand the other person's point of view. And this is usually what is the stumbling block. But generally when somebody with BPD, or if you have a narcissist that comes along for the whatever reason, and you go to couples counseling, well, the counselor is likely going to side with the one that they feel, and they shouldn't, but that they might feel most intimidated by, and or they have a good way of being, the martyr, sort of like poor them person, and they have a way of being convincing with that, obviously, right? But couples counseling is a disaster because people with BPD first need their own therapy and treatment, and without that, couples counseling can't get anywhere. And I can't tell you how many clients have come to me, like the person who was with the person with BPD, and they tried couples counseling, and they report to me what a disaster it was and explain why, and in which way. Wheels, when Psycho has her little, I like that, yeah, her little tantrums, and I can do so, I just, quote, walk away and go to my room. Quote, unquote, sorry. I still hear her yelling and slamming things for a while, but if you don't get dragged into, you don't get dragged into the narky conversation, in quotes. Yes, and that's being proactive. That's a great example of being proactive, Wheels. And that's good, that you can be happy when you do that, yes, because it's quite an accomplishment. And you're just leaving her with her own stuff instead of being the receptacle of it and her deriving supply, right? Hey there, Nancy. Being enmeshed with someone with BPD takes a long time to recover from, but it can be done with a lot of therapy. That's very true. Helps so much to know what you're dealing with. Yes, absolutely, it does. Hi there, Natalie. How are you? And see, Ty, you said, but AJ, could then the BPD use your, quote, not giving a crap, unquote, against you? Well, absolutely. Because even if you are just calm and emotionally detached from like chaos or whatever, then yeah, they're going to feel like abandoned right then and there. But guess what? Not your problem, not your responsibility. Yes, it can become your problem in a sense, right? But then you just have to detach from that too, because it's their responsibility. But that doesn't mean they're up to the task of taking that responsibility. So you make a very good point there too, but it's not a point that should hold one back from reframing, which takes quite a while to do, but reframing the reactive mindset into a proactive mindset, because it also involves recovery from codependency and working on issues, because you really need to let go of what you can't control there. That's what's key. And where is the second part of your comment? Quote, you don't love me, don't care enough about me. Yes, well, that's very possible and very likely that will happen. To which then one has to just, again, pause, be mindful, be present in the moment, deep breathe, slow down any reaction you might be having, and be emotionally detached from that, because it's not yours. And you're not there to be their cheerleader. You're not there to constantly reassure and validate them, contrary to what half the internet says about just validate them, it'll be okay. No, it's never enough, and it won't be okay. Because people with BPD need to learn to go to therapy, and in therapy, and it takes quite a while, and DBT is great, but it's not a recovery modality. People with BPD need to learn how to soothe themselves. And guess what they need to learn before they can learn how to soothe themselves? They have to find out who the heck they are. Because you can't soothe a self that you don't have, that you don't know, that you aren't in contact with, for lack of a better way to put it. People with BPD have gone no contact from their child ego stage. Paula, hey there. Your answer on reactive proactive just changed my life. I never thought of it that way. Thank you. Wow, just gave me goosebumps. That's so humbling and inspirational. I'm just glad whenever I can be helpful like that. It's like I'm so glad that something about that was really helpful for you. Nancy, radical acceptance and move forward with love. Well, yes, and depending on relationship type, it could be radical acceptance, mindfulness, surrender, disengagement, detachment, and relationship, move forward. But I realize for moms in the 25%, it's different with an adult child. And so in that case, sometimes moms find themselves needing to detach with love, but yes, the love continues because that's wholly different than all other relationship types. It might not be wholly different what you experience sometimes with an adult child with BPD, but it's a different type of relationship for sure. And oh, I'm glad to hear that, Natalie. And they say that we're supposed to validate them, validate their quote emotions unquote, not their possibly harmful actions. Well, yes, but when they're firing stuff at you, you first have to take care of yourself, because you can't control what they're doing or stop what they're doing, and you can't take responsibility for what they're doing. You don't want to. This is what codependents do: is they overreach and they try to, okay, you're feeling that bad. Well, now I'm feeling horrible because you're feeling that bad. But this idea of validation or try not to invalidate, well, yeah, sure, it's great. It's a great concept, and sometimes it works in practice. But when they're firing stuff at you because you're trying to be more proactive, and then they're like, but you don't really love me, but you don't really care about me, or you do this or you do that, you can't engage that. Because the second you engage that, you lose proactivity. If you get there, you're right back into reactivity. Because that is the unconscious manipulation of the person with BPD. Because, it's not conscious, intentful, but it's still manipulation. Because they're still pulling for you to do something different. And they're not allowing you to be you, and they're not taking responsibility for them being, well, they might not know who they are, but for them being them. And that's the thing about, so validation in an otherwise not very chaotic, dramatic kind of time, yeah, sure, if somebody with BPD can just say how they're feeling, like I feel horrible, or I feel like this, or I don't know why I feel like that, then you can absolutely go, well, I hear you, or that sounds very uncomfortable, or something like that that's validating. And then you don't want to be really invalidating, but when they come back at you with all these things, when you're trying to set a boundary, when you're trying to, people will, hopefully be trying to go from proactive or from reactive to proactive, then when they feel that they feel abandoned, you're not abandoning them, but they're triggered again, then it's like you get back into reactivity if you re-engage them with that. So what are alternatives? Well, it's hard to just sit there and say nothing, but really that's when people need to take space. And to do that, you really, at a calm time, need to sit the person down and tell them that when they get really upset, or if they start accusing, or if they start yelling, etc., you're going to go and take an hour away, or whatever you might need. Like, it could be more than that, but you're going to go outside for a walk, or you're going to go to the basement, or you're going to go to a different room, and then you will be happy to talk to them later. So, so really people stay in the orbit of the dysregulated person with BPD way too long. It's their orbit. You have to step out of the orbit. Otherwise, you're just going to be stuck in a reactionary, not only frame of mind, even from the subconscious, it's just going to be reactionary, because everything you say, it's just like cause and effect, right? They're having a reaction. You react to the reaction. They react to your reaction. You react to the reaction. It goes on forever. You have to disengage it. I mean, that's the healthiest thing for people to do. And if you're still in a relationship with somebody and this is going on and on and on and on, then I gently encourage people to think about, why are you still in that relationship? And I know it's really hard. These are huge decisions. And I'm not telling anybody what to do. But this is the impossibility of these relationships. Because people with BPD are unstable emotionally. They are aware of reality, though, objective reality, etc. I just want to make that clear, too. But they will get into an emotional parallel world in a hurry, but that doesn't mean they don't know what day it is, or the world, or objective reality beyond the emotionality of it all. But that's what codependents get held hostage to. You have to find a way to not be engaged that way. And that is what's at the heart of the impossibility of most of these relationships for most people. Nancy, thanks for remembering that I'm the 25%. Yeah, I remember that about you, Nancy. Very difficult to be so misperceived and blamed for things that never happened. Yes, I really hear you on that. And I know so many mothers, because I have that group on Facebook for parents of adult children with BPD, and I don't read it often or whatever, but every once in a while, it's just, yeah, I mean, and when I work with clients, I can't know how that feels. I never had a child, but it's heart-wrenching for sure. And the 25%, they have the perception, and it's not accurate, but it is as real to them as like what was really real for the 75%. And I can't imagine how difficult that is for moms. I mean, I know in a way, because I've talked to a lot of, moms in the 25% with adult children with BPD, but I can't know for sure. So it's very difficult, yes. And those are some of the sessions like I've had with some mothers with an adult child where I've cried with them. Like I have so much empathy, but words at a certain point fail me and fail them, and we've cried together. And that's not like lots of sessions, but sometimes, that can really happen. Because the best thing I can do is be there and be empathic, and I can't know what they feel. Like, I can only imagine. Is it possible for a BPD to have more than one favorite person? Well, as the story goes, as the narrative goes, I can't believe this thing. I mean, when I had BPD, none of this stuff was on the, nah. Apparently not. Now, maybe somebody with BPD would come along and say, but I have 3 favorite people. But I think really essentially a favorite person, because they're so black and white, so dichotomous, I think you would either be the favorite person or you wouldn't be. And I don't think that 2 people, it's not likely that they have more than, not really with the same meaning of what favorite person, whatever that is supposed to denote. Because I must admit, I find it to be one of the silliest things I've ever heard still. And I think I only heard it a year or 2 ago when I did my first couple of videos on that. Because it was not in the lexicon of language when I had BPD, but anyway. And could it be that their one favorite person gets replaced by, say, 2 or 3, quote, friends, unquote? Unlikely. I mean, they can try to seek others. If they devalue the favorite person, then they'll try to seek others. But they'll probably subconsciously be in search for who's going to be the next favorite person. And they usually don't keep friends long. So, And you said really perfect minions that validate them fully. Oh, yes. The favorite person of the borderline. You can watch that with some people with BPD on YouTube, actually. On their channels, they have set up their own sort of, they're each other's minions of only validation and all positivity despite all that they're going through. Yes, and they validate each other fully, and what they do with that is block any hope of growing. Because there's always going to be, to one degree or another, a little bit of like disagreement, a little bit of seeing things differently, a little bit of conflict in life in general. It doesn't have to be uber conflict, but how long does it take for 2 people to talk about something and somebody go, I don't know what I think about that. And if that person has BPD, they'll be like, triggered. So, as far as I know, it's only one person at a time. And Roller Girl said, yep, reaction ping pong. Yeah, very much. And if you think about it like that, as somebody who loved ping pong, I still do. I don't have a table now, but I used to have a ping pong table, and I grew up where there was one. And just when you think about playing ping pong, I mean, it's all about the ball going back and forth, isn't it? I mean, it's all about trying to get that ball like tennis or whatever. And so the goal in that, though, is not to keep giving the ball back to the other person, right? Like codependents trying to rescue a borderline. It's to place that ball in a way that the other person can't return it, right? So this is what people with codependency need to realize about reactivity versus the work in recovery it takes to be proactive and to change that mindset and to really do the work around that. Because if you think of it like ping pong, emotional ping pong, then you're actually volleying it back every time. So that's very reactionary. That's like automatic reaction that people probably aren't even thinking about. Seti, I feel like I need to understand what she was to heal. I can't stop researching. I was so happy before I met her. It's destructive. I'm out of the orbit now. Oh, well, that's good for you. Yes, I'm glad to hear that. More like Pluto than Mercury, but I'm still revolving. Well, and that is a very interesting and perplexing question that you posed, because I suppose, I don't want to go here, I suppose psychiatry's answer for that would be she might be BPD, subtype antisocial personality disorder, only they have no evidence for that, no science for that, just a really weak study, not replicated, that is ideology only. So I hesitate to give that to you as a plausible answer either. But I think by the very nature of the fact that she came clean, kind of takes straight up psychopath out of the picture. But narcissists can concoct fake lives as well, so hard to say. But I think really it's compelling. I can understand that. But what might be the healthiest thing and the best thing for you, and to be more proactive, because even your inquiry right now is a little bit, it would be in the reactive mindset versus proactive mindset. But you said, I can see where you might think it's proactive, because you're like, I don't think, you said, I was so happy before I met her. You said you feel like, oh, you need to understand what she was to heal. Well, there's a false equivalency for you, because you know what, you don't really. Because that's like chasing closure. And you don't need to, lots of people never get closure. And so if you don't get closure on, was that BPD, was that what psychiatry says BPD with, the subtype of ASPD, which I think is nonsense? Was that a narcissist? Point is, that's where you're still being reactive instead of proactive. Because proactivity would mean radically accepting that you're not really going to know for sure. That you can't really know for sure, letting it go, and being proactive in your moving forward. So that's going to take, if you want to choose that route for yourself, it's going to take a lot of distraction, a lot of thought stopping, a lot of other techniques. So you just keep putting your focus. Every time it comes in your mind, focus on something else. Focus on something else. Do something else. Distract yourself. There are other ways to do it too, but it's like you're seeking closure, and it's unlikely you're going to get it. And so that's still somewhat reactive. And you said same, she came clean because I had evidence. Yes, but a psychopath won't come clean even in the face of evidence, right? How many times, not that they're all, they don't all take people's lives, but even in the case where somebody has, and the police, and they're in jail, and they got all this evidence, they're still going to be like, whatever, or sometimes they'll talk about it. But coming clean because you had the evidence isn't really helpful to closure, right? To figuring this out, because she still concocted the lie of her life. Like, her whole life was a concocted lie. So that still kind of, to me, I don't know, but it's your situation, but to me that would still be the biggest important part to remember, rather than because you had evidence she came clean. So I don't know, but I just want to gently say, I hope you can hear what I'm saying about, that it would help you to maybe think about letting it go, because it really is closure that you're seeking, And if you believe that you can't heal till you get it, that's an obstacle, and I mean this with all due respect, that you've created for yourself. It's a false equivalency. It's a mind trap that you've created for yourself. And I know it can be really compelling, but you can break free from it. You don't really need to figure it all out. You so deserve to let it go. And I know that my saying that, it's harder to do than it is for me to say that. Wheels, how many diagnoses does the ham sandwich have now? Oh, I don't know. How many are there? Let's count them all up. And boy, don't have that ham sandwich. I know. Well, there's hope in, I forgot for a while. I have copies of ICD International, I forget what it is, but it's like the world's DSM, except for America, and Canada's affected. North America is pretty much adherent to this DSM nonsense of the pseudoscience of psychiatry. I have to get that in every video. No, I don't, but it just comes up. But the ICD-11, parts of it published now, parts of it being, the rest of it going to be published soon, is, and in Scandinavia and parts of Europe, they're being much more proactive. And in some cases, treatment is not geared to personality disordered individuals anymore. They're dropping the labels in a few places. And the thing is, so, and it's something that, yes, Vaknin talked about, put it all out there, but I've been on the trail of it, but of course, he's got the uber genius or nothing else to do. I don't know, whatever the case is, but, so he laid this out in a video recently where I now finally have an explanation I need. I just need to find that study because I've read another one. And this is a study, by the way, and psychiatry is kind of maybe functioning around the world a little differently than it is in North America. And those of us in North America can get too North American centric, and we got to remember the rest of the world. And they do a lot of incredible things. It never happens in America, and Canada gets so affected by America. No offense to Americans, right? So this reality of how they are now in a pioneering place of being able to distinguish between, so 3 groups essentially. This is just rough off the top of my head. People that were studied, high BPD traits, whatever the heck that still means, it's a response to adverse childhood experience, in one group. Another group, no, I believe, no, don't quote me on this, but I'm paraphrasing, no BPD traits, high and all CPTSD stuff. How they delineate, I don't know. So I have to read it more fully. Then, in another group, this finally explains my freaking life, low BPD traits, high CPTSD. Because I was atypical for BPD the whole time, and I've been saying that for years. So as I pursue this information, and I'm going to have much more coming on it, it's probably going to be video series that aren't going to be free, but they're not going to cost an arm or a leg. And it's probably going to be an ebook or something, because finally there's like a way to go forward. And this, I'm not sure about this particular study, but if not this one, the one prior to it, has been replicated. So in the world out there, beyond North America, there's psychiatry that believes in the scientific method that's getting closer when they replicate something. So what I think this is going to lead to, and should lead to, but Lord knows, like in the US, Big Pharma, the hegemony with the pseudoscience of psychiatry, they're going to resist like crazy, should lead to the obliteration of borderline personality as we've known it, as they continue to try to morph it, with this, that, and the other, because it's not neurological, it's not a chemical imbalance in the brain, it's not a brain disease or disorder, it's not even a freaking mental illness, okay? This is all false construct, and who does it serve? It doesn't serve people with BPD, it doesn't help them get well. The stigma, the way that 50% of professionals treat people with BPD, and trust me, even when I was going through my recovery, I wasn't like everybody else, but the labels follow me around. Remember, never assess, just label. 17-year-old female. That doesn't happen to just about, like, almost, but not everybody, right? Point being, it as soon as you have that label anywhere near you, 50% now, today, really, in America for sure, and other places, professionals don't, they don't have the competency, a certain percentage, to deal with it, period, and B, they won't. So these studies, and through the ICD-11, partly published now and coming out, are going to probably within a year or two obliterate this garbage catch-all as it started out to be in the well, somebody coined it in 38, but the 50s, borderline personality disorder. You know, you ask so many professionals. I've asked psychiatrists, the ones I interviewed on Blog Talk Radio, and I should probably flip those up here, even though most people don't listen to them. If you ask them what you think about BPD, they're like, it's BS. I don't care about it. Why? What? This is become an industry on the backs of people who have adverse childhood experience. And it's unconscionable on the part of these professionals. And again, I want to stress, it doesn't make every psychiatrist a bad guy or a bad woman. But this is what they're taught. This is the lens they have. And if they dare, in America especially, if they dare to speak out against it, then they're not going to get published anywhere, if that's their goal. So I'm now doing, and so Vaknin did a good thing there, amid all the other things he does. Just to be fair, credit where it's due. I was already on the trail of it, but boy, watching one of his videos blew it open for me. And all the names are there, and I can follow the trail now. But the thing is, it's time to obliterate this thing. And that's not to excuse the behavior, but it's to look at the humanistic context of that adverse experience. The same way that, well, some people are trying to say, there's a couple out there, but we all know Rosenberg, right? Trying to continually pathologize codependency. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. It's just as ridiculous to pathologize BPD. Why? Because the behavior can be atrocious, but the behavior isn't the person, because the person isn't even home. They don't know who they are. Anyway, passionate about this, see? Not a BPD apologist, but when you've been on both sides, and you look at it from both sides, so what the ICD in the world is doing is fabulous. North America, we think we're all that. We are so behind the times. And especially in the U.S., I mean, everything is big, big profit. They're not going to change there, It's horrible what goes on. And it's not much better in Canada right now. But we need to look to the rest of the world because they're way ahead of us on this. And so much more, I'm sure. All that because you asked me how many diagnoses for ham sandwich wheels. I'm an associate of mine, what can I say? C-Ty, even if I mess that up, I'll try, okay? Why is it that BPDs are said to be intelligent? Well, they're not all the same. Like I had a partner for 13 years when I had BPD many moons ago, who was not bright at all. So they're not all, but a lot of people with BPD do have really a lot of intelligence. And I would think, I don't know, I'm not going to talk about myself that way, but to whatever degree I have intelligence, I would say part of my thing is it's because I have high functioning Asperger's, so that really helps. But the other part is that when you're growing up with adverse childhood experience constantly, and lots of people who end up with the label of BPD definitely have at least a narcissistic parent or cluster B parent, except for the 25%, so 75%. And the thing is, so where was I going with that? Yeah, the intellect gets enhanced by the fact that you're trying to survive every single day with one of these crazy cluster B parents. You never know when they're going to go off. You never know when they're, like, when I never knew when he was going to physically come at me, literally. I never knew. And so I know for my childhood and adolescence, I was always like watching them and trying to evaluate what mood, and I mean, I would pay attention when my father came home from work, how hard his shoes hit the floor when he was walking, because it was an indicator of, was he really pissed or was he just, And so I think that's part of it, because it's part of survival. It works into the defense mechanisms of that kind of adverse childhood experience in 75%. And I think that's part of it. And also what happens in BPD and the emotional reality of that is, like, it's not some genetic thing. It doesn't interfere with the brain, obviously, or how could people with BPD be so intelligent? So other things are functional, and people with BPD can still learn, but the emotional intelligence they didn't learn, and that's part of recovery in BPD, is building up the emotional intelligence. And then you said, they seem to be so wrapped up in themselves. Yes, they often are. They don't have enough time and intellectual resources to really succeed. If that makes, oh yes, it makes perfect sense. Because they're so wrapped up in when they haven't gotten any treatment, or they might not know they have BPD, or they've gotten some treatment but stopped short of really what it takes to get through and recover and heal and really know oneself and what that means in the emotional landscape beyond even intellectual understanding in a process of healing and recovery. So why they are so, I want to say it how you said it, where is it? They're so wrapped up in themselves because, like, I have a video on that. The self-absorption is a function of the narcissistic defenses in BPD. And I want to say that very carefully because I'm not saying it's narcissistic personality disorder. So they're constantly ruminating, rethinking, reworking, trying to figure out what they can't figure out, essentially because they don't have the balance of emotional intelligence. They have unstable sense of identity. They don't know who they are. So they're lost. So they spend all this time trying to figure stuff out that they're not really going to figure out unless going through a full recovery process, which can take 8 to 12 to 16 years. So it's like a lot of that intellect for many people with BPD can be absolutely wasted in the circles of defense and rumination and all the things that they don't realize that they've lost themselves, that they don't know who they are. They might realize that in some way. They also don't understand that they can't trust others because they don't know themselves, etc. So they're ruminating and trying to figure all this stuff out up here when it's laying in their emotional landscape and it's in the past. And every time they get triggered to it, they just got to escape it. So that's why the intellect can be very wasted in people who don't get treatment. And some of them can be high functioning, the subtype of discouraged borderline, the quiet borderline. They can be high functioning, just means they have a stronger set of defenses, and they can definitely learn and have careers, some of them, but they're all different. Wheels, I spent a lot of time trying to understand the quote parents unquote and the rest of the family of origin, but I don't need to know how or why things are so to know they are. I still wish I could know sometimes, but you said I know I can't. Well, and again, that's like the whole thing too, like I'll just share with you, like, because of the family of origin I grew up in, and a dark haired father, a BPD, NPD comorbid mother, probably with Asperger's, and relatives that were all, not every single one of them, but a lot of them, borderline or a couple of psychopaths, and narcissists, etc. I never got the closure. I had to do the healing and move forward. I went no contact. It's not like there's any closure there. I've gotten my own closure a long time ago now, or a little bit still working on a little bit where the female parental unit is concerned. But really that is mostly because she's still here. And if she weren't here, then I could do that last piece. Can't do that last piece till she's not here. She's not in my life, but she's still on the planet, and it matters. So the thing is, we're never going to get closure with them or from them. And so it's good that you're starting to let go of that, Wheels, because the wishing that you could know more, understand, I think I know a lot more all these years later and understand a lot more, maybe, perhaps, but guess what? It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything. Because what we need to do is heal in our emotional landscape and raise our emotional intelligence as part of that healing and recovery and in codependency. And having been, put through all that you go through with those kind of parents, which is horrible, and we need to learn to be in that proactive mindset and have our focus in the healthiest place, which is on, for you, your own recovery. For me, years ago, was my own recovery, and not them. To this day, what the female parental unit or the NARC golden child, etc., does, probably, if I hear the odd thing through the grapevine, but I don't care one way or the other, because it's not going to make any more sense today than it made 30, 40 years ago. Because they're all still the same. That's all I need to know. Doesn't, you know. So people have to be really careful of this search for the closure that I help people, and I'm sure other, professionals help people. You can find your own closure. And that's really the way forward. It's not about ever figuring them out to the nines. Even if you do that, it's not going to give you emotional closure. It's the emotional closure that people need to process through. The most, I should say. It's annoying that there can be something out there. Like, things about my parents, I can still go, I don't know. Like, why in the, I don't know. So I don't bother with it anymore. Said, I'm trying to let go, and it's getting much better. Thanks for your valuable input. Well, you're very welcome. I'm glad it was helpful. I listen to you a lot. Even when I get past this, I'll probably still show up. It's very fascinating, yet tragic subject. Yes, well, it is. And it has its fascination aspects to it, for sure. But people really need to make sure that they focus on their healing and recovery. And, once you're solidly, move forward in your life, you can always still have an interest in what can be fascinating about all this, but from a not emotional place, right? I know I'm a student of it. I've been a student of it for my life, but like in terms of working with people, I'm always trying to learn more, understand more about how people are experiencing what they're experiencing, and what are their blocks, and where are they stuck, and not always why, but sort of how can we get to them, to the blocks, to the other. Can we bring that into the people's consciousness? That's really what I do, because the answers really do lie inside of each and every one of us. But it doesn't mean like I couldn't get there by myself. I certainly needed help with not only the BPD recovery, but codependency, etc. And the CPSD reality that's really, really there. But again, I would say as far as CPTSD goes, I'm not very affected by that at all today anymore. I don't mean just today, but years, I'm not saying I'm perfect either, like nobody is, right? And I wonder why you consider psychiatry to be false pseudoscience. I suspect it has to do with money and political correctness. Is that the case? Well, it'd be everything that I would call politically incorrect about psychiatry. It is, they have an agenda, the power center. And Big Pharma wants to make money. Big Pharma in the United States. So what did you start that? You wonder why I consider this. Well, I didn't just come up with it myself. Google Dr. Peter Breggin. Look at his books. Look at the effect of this medication that they're pushing on people as if it's like healthy to do so or reasonable to do so. Because except for maybe something in bipolar, not even as much in ADHD. But because people can find their way to coping with things without this medication. It is the medication that introduces chemical imbalance into the brain. And these are actual facts that people who know more than I do have laid out there for the rest of us to know. So I just want to give that some context. And I always think of Dr. Peter Breggin, and I always think of the book Anatomy of an Epidemic by Robert Whitaker, wherein the meat of the book, the quote is, quote, there's no such thing as a chemical imbalance in the brain until unless you take psychiatric medication, end quote. There are massive amounts, like hundreds of thousands, if not a couple million people, on anti-psychiatry Facebook groups. There are a lot of people who know what I'm talking about. So you don't have to agree with me, but I would think everybody would be well served to do their own research. But I wanted to say that Big Pharma in the United States, the profit they make per year is second only to the U.S. industrial military complex, or however you say that. So that's what they're about. It's corporatocracy. They don't, at that level, they don't care about people. I'm not saying everybody who works in that industry, nobody cares, or psychiatry, but in the power center of psychiatry, they're looking for, why is it that it's said in the literature that, quote, psychiatric medication is contraindicated for the treatment of borderline personality, end quote, and yet they still just keep shoving all these prescriptions at people? Well, it's unethical. It's unprofessional. It is pseudoscience and worse, words that I'd have to put alleged in front of to say without maybe getting sued. But I'm adamant about it. And I refused all that stupid medication. And I was just lucky that I was stubborn and had some common sense, and I don't know what else to attribute it to. But it is a false pseudoscience because nothing about their studies is scientific. There's no evidence, nothing. They just do a study. Big Pharma usually funds a study. Big conflict of interest, confirmation bias. They go with all biases, and they have the agenda already that, hey, we have this medication, and essentially they got to find something to put the medication with, and that's, I mean, that might sound crazy, but that's kind of how it works, and it's an industry, and that's what it is. It's not about mental health. It's not about people caring about helping people heal. It's people who block people's ability to heal. You know, a lot of this psychiatric medication, but anyways, it's pseudoscience because they do not replicate their studies. They do not have proof. There's nothing scientific. And they will not let psychiatrists, because I've talked to psychiatrists and I've interviewed psychiatrists. I haven't been their patient or anything, I'm just saying. They contact me often, and you know, we exchange information to ask me questions about stuff in my life, and I ask them lots of questions in return. And they're psychiatrists who don't hold to this narrative of psychiatry, you know, ever since it was like the biopsychosocial model, and then some. So the point is, these psychiatrists cannot write opposing opinions or suggest new things to be studied, but when a study is finished and the conclusion, you know, the ideology is in, the biased ideology, there's no scientific proof. So if you might know, but if you just look up what is science, and science, the process of science and evidence is that studies are done but need to be replicated and proven and proven and reproven and criticized and open to scrutiny. Psychiatry does none of that. So at the end of their studies, they have nothing but an ideology and no proof. That's why it's pseudoscience. Straight up, that's why. Well, I think, yes, they love making money. I mean, they're for-profit businesses when that's not what should be going on in mental health or in caring for people. But you say you wonder why Google it, look into it. On the front page of my YouTube channel, go down, scroll to the bottom, there's a whole playlist that in one way or another, video after video, exposes psychiatry. There's a lot of exposing of it out there. Definitely a lot in the U.S. is so wrong, can get depressing. I'm glad I got to be here with AJ and all. Well, you know, and it's kind of depressing in Canada too, especially to see the progress the world is making. So that also speaks to, and they have a study, pioneering study recently. They replicated it, ladies and gentlemen. That would be scientific. That's evidentiary. Not just doing one and here's the results, and because we think this, like it's truth. And if you actually ask one of these people, been in a few of these dialogues, they run out of facts. They don't have facts. They run out of explanation. And then if I throw at them, yeah, well, okay, so if you say the brain this, the brain that, the brain the other thing, what about neuroplasticity? And then they absolutely are speechless right there. It's like a mad, crazy hoax is what it is. Throw it at it's like so much has evolved, you know, since the 50s. But treating, quote, mental illness, the false construct of it, that's not what their goal is. That's not what they do. Wheels, I can attest to this. I feel like I got to be 20 steps ahead of Psycho and her minions all the time. I always try to put logic where there clearly isn't any. Well, yes. Yes. It does make sense. And, yes, what you said there, Wheels, about psychiatry, it really is. Shagship, you said you had similar experiences. She would come back from therapy with a smile after her fantasies validated. Well, yeah, how's that helpful, right? I mean, and they give the medication, And there's kickbacks and payments for that and whatever. I'm not saying illegal or anything, just that. And then, yes, a lot of people don't want to do the hard work with people with BPD because it means conflict. And no, I don't get into open conflict, but they get into, conflict comes my way. And I just like detach from that and observe that, and but a lot of people, working with people with BPD, don't want to do that, and like you said, they will validate the fantasies, and they're not helping anybody. Not helping anybody. BPD's, quote, facts, unquote, are all based on their current emotions. Well, yes, they magically think, as do a lot of people actually don't have BPD, but magical thinking, which is not thinking, it is believing what you feel is real without any other evidence to the contrary, like without checking things out, right? And Shakespeare said, yes, and they are forever filed away for future reference. Yeah, sadly enough, they are. And I mean, in my recovery process, when I encountered a couple of shrinks, if I would have listened to them, oh, that would have been the end of me right there. And what they wanted me to take, And then the threats and the emotional blackmail that if I didn't take it, they were going to do this, that, and the other to me. I was like, middle finger all the way, I don't care, bye. And eventually would get away from them, but sometimes they wouldn't just let me walk away because they can be really, really, they have their own problems, cluster B issues, you know what I'm saying? Not all, but the ones I encountered, I would think. At least a couple of them did. But the other thing, too, is, in 1987, when I was seeing a psychiatrist, and I've talked about this before, and I'm in the appointment, and it's 20 minutes long only because they're supposed to be med appointments, but I wasn't on any psychiatric meds. And I was particularly in a place that day, and I wouldn't say a state or a crisis. It was just, I was pushing forward, and I really wanted to get where I needed to go. And the guy fell asleep. And so I was like, wow. So I got up, and I kicked his chair really hard. It was like a recliner, big thick. I didn't touch him. And you might say, well, kicking the chair is pretty bad, too. Okay, but like I thought it was lesser of the evils at the time. So shocked him awake. And then he was like, because I'm kind of thinking you're supposed to be awake, dude. Not that you're helpful, but you could at least pretend that you're seeing me or something. But I was in the middle of like, am I ever going to get any better? What is this? What's going on? And so he was half asleep, and he said, my chances, what my hope of getting better rested on was, quote, when we find the better pill, unquote. And I wasn't on any medication, and that's BS, and to this day. And I recovered. And I know this must be scary for some people out there, but it's like I never had it. Yeah, right. That kind of recovered. Done with it. Over a long time ago. I'm a human being now. I make mistakes like other people. And maybe I don't handle this perfect or that perfect, but it's not because I'm a borderline. And guess what? All these people are being held hostage. And we have a couple of generations of young people now who believe the pseudoscience of psychiatry. Oh, you can't be cured. There is no need for a cure. They're full of it. They don't know what they're talking about. And they keep studying. Like, oh, geez, what they keep studying. Now, there are maybe 15% of people with, quote, BP, unquote, that are much more severely impacted. It likely involves comorbidity. It gets different. And maybe some of that study, if it was scientific and not just pushing medication, could be helpful. But for the rest of people, not all people with BPD are like by miles and miles and miles in some cases, whatever, far distances. And I have a video out there, by the way, that I forget what it's called, but the picture says fake facts. And it's where I talk about that what people with BPD think are their facts, not so much for loved ones, right? I don't remember what it's called, though, so. By the way, if you want to see some of my older videos that I'm putting up, I put them on my community tab. Been doing that lately. Taking some of the live streams out of the archives, putting them back up, putting them on the community tab, just so you can keep up to date if, you haven't found something of mine and you want to watch something that I've already done, or maybe it's a year or 2 or 5 or 10 or 11 years old when I used to look like I was 35 or 40 when I was actually in my early 50s, whatever the case. So check my community tab once in a while because I'm putting things up there too to help people to find it. I don't know if it helps or not, but I'm wondering if it doesn't help in the algorithm a little, because who knows, right? Roller Girl, magical thinking things are real that aren't. Well, yes, but let's not mix that with psychosis now, because too many people are beating on the drum of BPDs are all psychotic. No, they're not. It's following feelings without logic. Okay, but it's not necessarily psychosis. I just want to make that clear too. All these things out there. Lying to themselves until they believe it to be true. Well, and they're not, it's not really like they're lying to themselves. It's defense mechanisms. And I'm not making any excuses for them. But it's trying to catch up to a lost self. And it doesn't work. People have to go and get treatment to go through the process of finding and recovering that lost self and what all of that entails. And Wheels, as an American, I'm sorry our country is dragging the rest of North America into our shenanigans. Well, definitely they've got, people up here with BPD are on lots of meds, and yeah. We can thank mostly Dr. Joel Paris from McGill University in Montreal, Quebec for that, because he's the one that went down and interfaced, because he had to make a big name for himself, allegedly. And, I'm not saying he's the only one, because there's another one that wrote a book. His name escapes me he's at university at one of the universities in British Columbia. But yes, it just came right up across the border, and then like nobody up here kind of like questioned it enough, But it's not your responsibility, Wheels, at all, right? It's not the individual American's responsibility at all. Michelle, what are the main differences between a male with BPD and a female one? Wow. At this juncture in a live stream, can't really do that justice, but I can say that there are, first of all, there are similarities, right? There's the core similarities of what, quote, BPD really is, means. Males will often present it differently than females, but not always. And the other thing about that is the main differences between. Well, first of all, we have to parse it one step further. Not all men with BPD are the same. Not all women with BPD are the same as all women. And not all males and females are so dissimilar with BPD. But again, it's so highly individual. Men can often be more physically aggressive, but so can some women. But that's one of the manifestations in men. Many men, not all with BPD, tend to get into a lot more trouble with the law. So do some females with BPD. I would think that it might be more difficult for some males who are the type of BPD that, or the quiet type, the discouraged type, that are more needy or clingy or vulnerable, because that's difficult for a lot of men in the world, regardless of circumstance of why they feel that way. But so it's hard to say what I'm not comfortable to say the main differences are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, because it's all predicated first on there's no monolithic group of BPD males, there's no monolithic group of BPD females. So that probably isn't too helpful, but I just think that they share more in common than not, but across what all their individual realities are for each person with BPD. And he said, have you read the book Hard to Love, Understanding and Overcoming Male BPD? I actually don't think I have read that one. I'll have to look into that, because I read most of them, but I don't think I've heard of that one. Maybe I've heard of it, but I don't think I've read it. Hard to Love, Understanding and Overcoming Male BPD. Well, maybe they delineate a few things in there, and maybe they're applicable and practical, and maybe they're not. I don't know. Maybe from that, did you glean anything out of the book that gave you any sense of what a major difference or two could be, at least between males with BPD and females? Because, I mean, there's a lot that's being said that doesn't make sense, because, psychiatry is trying to forward right now, the pseudoscience of American psychiatry, let me be more specific, is trying to, they postulated based on ideology so weak in a study, never backed up, no scientific proof, that, BPD is in some, not all, but the female variant of antisocial personality disorder. The female variant. But males? Oh no, they're fine. It's just BPD. That's the kind of nonsense. Oh, you just ordered the book. Okay, well, I'll be in the same camp with you. And we'll see what it says. But there's a lot of things said out there, even by a lot of authors and professionals, I just don't agree with. But then again, I'm not saying that makes me righter or smart or anything like that. I'm not doing that kind of comparison when I make these statements. What I'm saying is there's a lot of stuff that comes out in these books that's just repeating a lot of the ideology of unproven facts, like as facts. So that's another thing that needs to be parsed from any source, right? And I don't mean that in any like grandiose way. I mean, I don't know everything. I just kind of spot what doesn't make sense more often than not. Like this doesn't make sense. What's up with that? It doesn't mean I have all the answers. You can't wait to read it. It's highly rated on Amazon. Oh yeah, okay. Well, I'll have to look into that too. Thank you for mentioning it. Yes, and it looks like Roller Girl and maybe some other people, and maybe some people watching this back if they don't know that book yet. That's great. Somebody in a comment suggested a book the other day too. I forget what it was for though. I have so many books, reading so many books. I need to write books. Like it. I mean, I have some projects on the go, is what I mean. But it's like it's hard to get. But then I'm lucky because I can get into a book and get the meat out of it. I don't have to read the whole thing. I especially don't need the examples. Some people really live by the examples in books, right? And I'm like, I have a couple of ebooks that have examples in them because people like that, but I don't like that. I wonder why BPDs see their, quote, projections. How? I wonder how, people with BPD see their, quote, projections, unquote. Well, they don't. They're not consciously aware of them at all. They can't make heads or tails out of them. That's why they're projections. And you got to remember also projective identification in BPD because human beings project too. It's just that we usually catch ourselves. Like, have you ever said to a friend, I was saying to my partner last night, as a matter of fact, said something to her, it wasn't like a big deal, we were just talking, having a good time, but I said something, I said, something's interesting about whatever it was, and I said, or I could be projecting, wait a minute, or that could be true of that too. So the difference between people with BPD is they like, because projection isn't just in people with BPD. We all can project. But if we're thinking people, right, and we have some modicum of balance between our EQ and our IQ, then we can go, wait a minute, I just said blah, blah about that or that person or this situation, and what am I feeling inside here? Because could that be partially me? Could that be, that's the way that we check objective reality. But that doesn't mean people with BPD are always outside of objective reality, but they are when they're triggered, and they are when they're drowning in emotions, and they are when a little bit out of touch with objective reality, not the whole caboodle of it, kit and caboodle, but the perceptions that are changed through the emotionality of magical thinking. And so they're not aware of the projections. They don't know how to check things out at all because that requires a self and emotional intelligence. You said, I know one BPD who says they are trying to see them in random people on the street. What does that mean? Oh my. It could mean that they're trying to see themselves, or do you mean the projections? They could be trying to see themselves or gain some sense of identity by watching other people, random people, which that's not going to help at all, but that's just one interpretation of what you said. I'm not sure if that's what you meant or not. And Wheels, I think this is the BPD fake fact video. Oh, thank you, Wheels. It's very helpful. So there's a link to it if anybody's interested in checking that out. I can't remember what the heck I said, but there you go, But just the reality that people with BPD think they know some facts, right? That everybody around them knows. No, not really, because it's their magical thinking. Oh, you meant the projections. Okay, so somebody with BPD who says they are trying to see their projections in random people on the street. What does that mean? Oh my. Well, it means that they're involved in an absolutely futile exercise, number one. Because how could you know what you're projecting onto a random stranger on the street? because there'd be no way to check that out, right? So people with BPD, this is what therapy is so, among other things, helpful for, is like when I was in BPD recovery and CPTSD recovery, but I didn't know that, the thing at the time, the thing is that you would say something in the group therapy, like I was in group therapy at this point, or if you say it to a therapist, then you got somebody who might look at you like, pardon me, excuse me, what? And people that are aware, like the therapists were aware when I was projecting on them, or projective identification when I wasn't aware. So that's something that is futile to try to do. Doesn't mean anything, actually, is the answer to your question, with random strangers on the street, because it needs to be mirrored back, and they need to have feedback and be able to accept feedback about that to be able to get into a more objective reality and out of just the subjective nature of what's driving the projections or projective identification in the first place. So that sounds like absolutely, when you said what does it mean, it's a futile exercise, and I have no idea why that person would think that that would help. But God bless them, I guess they're trying to figure something out. But that's not how people with BPD will ever figure out what they're projecting or what the projections involve. So, you know, they don't really have the metacognition. They don't really have, you know, until unless a lot of treatment, a person with BPD is so not able to come to you and say, you know, when you said, if I do this, that you're going to go out for an hour, does that mean for sure you're coming back? Like, or you're going to bend? They don't kind of do that checking in. They just go with the thought, the feelings, and the magical thinking, which is totally all about, it's not really thought, but it's feelings that drive thought distortions and misperceptions constantly in circles. And they're not aware of that. So anyway, I hope that was helpful for people. And it's probably 110 degrees in here. But I did a video earlier with the air conditioner on, and this one in this room is quieter, but no, it's very loud on the video. So anyway, I think, and it was good to see you again, Shell Chicago and Shag Sheep, and people that I haven't seen for a while. Shag Sheep, maybe not that long ago, but, how many people can be in a group therapy session at once? Is there any limit beyond which it becomes less effective? Well, from what I've done some group work, like with clients in person, like offline, and you know, some was not that long ago and some was a long time ago. And when I was in therapy, it was like 8 people, well, yeah, 8 clients in a process group, or any kind of group. DBT might be different, but in psychodynamic therapy, it would be 8 people max. And then there was times when the 2 8 groups would come together into a larger group of chaos, and all kinds of fun learning and stuff like that. So yeah, you know, like, and if I get to doing online groups, I don't know, because people were expressing interest but then not. I think I'm going to stick with what I do, and I'm going to do sessions, and I'm going to do, I'm going to have a lot of information products coming, which will be in all different kinds of, like, video, audio, and written form. But, like, it's probably better for me to do it that way. And again, I'm not going to cost an arm and a leg. But if you do go to purchase anything of mine at ajmahari.com or stillphoenixrisingpublications.com, I just want to say this because somebody had this problem yesterday. Don't order it, purchase it, come back to the page from PayPal, and then not download it. And if you're at phoenixrisingpublications.com, you've got to download onto a computer still. That's why I'm trying to move everything over to ajmahari.com, but I haven't had time, and I've decided it's more important to get new things out. But I struggle with time because I really work with clients a lot. So anyway, yes, it would be 8, I think, maximum in a group, process group in psychodynamic therapy. I'm just trying to think when I was in the other type of, you know, I'm trying to watch the AI this time, a different kind of recovery group for, you know, what happens to children that's really awful. I'm not sure if there was a limit. Might have been 10 or 12. But yeah, it's usually the modality, because DBT groups might be larger too. So it's not really about how many people can we fit in this room as much as it might be in DBT, because it's not so, like process groups and psychodynamic work, between people in a process group or like a recovery group is going to be different, because it like the 12-step groups out there. DBT doesn't allow crosstalk, right? It's not processing. It's not giving feedback unless it's about the skills exactly. So it depends on the modality when it's involving a group. But most of them have a limit of 8 in psychodynamic or process work for the most part. So, and if I were to do a couple groups online, which is maybe still a possibility, but I'm just not pursuing it at this moment, I'd probably limit it, because of online, I'd probably limit it to 4 maximum. Because, people have to have time to interact, etc. But I guess numbers are driven. Like the program that I was in many years ago, I don't know, 15 or so years ago now. I was in it like 30 years ago, but 15 years ago, it got defunded and it doesn't exist anymore. And so the funding issues are severe because there aren't even a lot of psychodynamic group therapy or group therapy types of programs around for people, which is really, sad, because they can be so helpful. They can also really require a lot to be in them, because, but I think it really enhanced my recovery for sure, because I wasn't just having to listen to therapists, I was getting feedback from other people too. Sometimes I didn't enjoy it. Sometimes I didn't like it much. Sometimes I didn't agree with it for a while. But the more people that would say the same thing, the more you were like, well, wait a minute. They might have a point. I don't know what it is. And then, would be more feedback and more food for thought. And you said it's a good thing that this video does not have any... Oh, it doesn't, does it? Okay, yeah, well, that's been easing up a little, but let's not tempt fate, right? So, whatever the case, I'm not too worried about that. So, but I do have to get going because my dogs are sweating too, and the cat's out there sweating. So, there's no way to air condition the living room because of the balcony and everything. But it's been. Oh, and you said, do you think the mental health system in Canada is getting underfunded, mismanaged? Totally, absolutely, yes. Equivocally, yes. It's a mess. And in the Toronto area, CAMH, in my humble opinion, not good. And they don't have the resources and they don't have the funding. I'm not trying to say therapists aren't good. I don't know them, but things are vastly underfunded. And in other areas and smaller cities, it's like, there was a smaller city where I got interviewed by a paper some years ago because they instituted a DBT program. They were going to take in 50 clients a year. 50. When the need might be like 50,000 to 500,000 or something. And they weren't even limiting it to just people with BPD. And the reporter asked me in the story, what did I think of that? And I said, this is absurd. I said, we need way more funding for this. Because so lucky 50 people. What about all the other people that aren't going to be alive when their turn on the wait list comes? So yeah, it's a mess in Canada. It's an absolute mess. And I was extremely fortunate to find what I found, but it was a lot of years ago. And some people can still be fortunate to find some treatment, etc. And DBT is not a recovery modality. And it seems like more and more, and in Canada as well, what they're doing is they're just sending people with BPD to DBT once or twice, and after that, have some meds, and we'll see you later. That's not recovery. It's not recovery. It's symptom management at best, and it still leaves people not knowing who they are, not getting that deeper work done, because guess what? To fund that deeper work, as was funded for me and others when I was in group therapy many years ago, that must have cost a freaking fortune. Because that group, they had 6 therapists working in the group, they had 2 different groups going on, programs, and it was long term. I went through it 3 times. And each time I was blessed that I just took out my provincial health card and they swiped it. And it didn't cost me a penny. I still feel guilty over that. It's a little bit of codependency. But no, Canada, it's a mess. And you said I've read bad things about CAMH as well. How can the wait list be almost 2 years? Well, sometimes wait lists are 5 years now. Because they're that underfunded, and not everybody that goes to DBT actually gets helped. Because not everybody gets it. because it's not the modality for everybody, but massive underfunding. And you realize that CAMH used to be way years ago, like when I was a kid. Um, because what the psychiatrist said to me at 17 was, you have borderline personality disorder. We can't help you here. Go to the Clark Institute of Psychiatry, which was what CAMH, CAMH today used to be the Clark Institute of Psychiatry. And all I knew about that moment in time in my life was in Toronto growing up, we all knew that the Clark Institute of Psychiatry was, quote, the nut house. So all I knew that shrink had imparted to me in terms of knowledge, none, was that I was a nut. And I actually wasn't a nut, and I'm still not a nut. So anyways, But the thing is, yeah, CAMH evolved out of the Clark Institute of Psychiatry. So I've always wondered about an inherent, did they really remake everything all over again? And I don't know. So, and I've seen some other things like videos from other places in Canada where they treat BPD, and it like pretty messy. It's pretty messy. So, and there isn't much for family members. There's maybe a couple of cities, but yeah, funding is the problem, and it's a mess. And where does all the resources go, right? Yeah, to an epidoodly supposed demic, or somewhere else if not that. But anyway, um, yeah. Well, yeah. So, anyways, I am gonna head out now, and everybody take care. And by the way, just so you know, I still can't pick a time and a day because of my schedule and my life now, because it's wonderful having this wonderful partner in my life. It's great, it's exciting, it's really amazing. But anyway, I'm going to be live streaming more, so if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please do hit the hit the top bell so you get all the notifications, because that's one way you can find out I'm online if you're not just tooling around YouTube and you might see the red dot. Finally learned how to set it up ahead of time, so I should do that a little bit more ahead. Finally learned how to do that because I couldn't figure that out for the longest time. So I will be live streaming a lot more, and I keep wanting to make them a little shorter, but they keep going a little bit longer. But like, yeah, gonna aim towards an hour or under is my goal, but I haven't got there yet. So everybody take care, because I do like to answer questions. And I guess the way it goes now is I do some information giving at the beginning, and then some people come along and questions, and then, so. But anyways, take care, and thank you so much for being here. Some wonderful questions asked, great inquiries, people sharing, etc. And just know that by being here and what you shared, for people watching back, gives you the opportunity to be helping others as well. So I don't just look at it as me helping others, but you guys are also part of helping others. So thank you very much. Okay, everybody take care. I just have to find the right button sequence, because technology, I know a little bit about it, but the more it advances, the more I stay behind. Okay.